Okay.
I'll go, Stella.
Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to Autism BC Talks. I'm Stella Hui with Autism BC. Today's topic is social emotional learning for autistic youth during extraordinary times, presented by board certified behavior analyst Bohdanna Popowycz. Bohdanna has extensive experience in the autism field for more than 25 years, and she wears many hats as a leader in different settings. Currently, she works as a behavior consultant, a life skills coordinator at a local high school, a consultant at a US school district, and as a mother of 3 amazing kids. Over the years, Bohdanna has touched many hearts of the individuals and the families to work with, because she always goes the extra miles to get into the root issue and always thinks outside the box to help her students learn and be successful. So we are honored to have Bo as our speaker. Facebook friends, please type your questions on the comment box. Zoom audience, please type your questions on the chat box, and your questions will be addressed during the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, are you ready, Bo?
I am always ready and excited.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay. Well, firstly, I want to say thank you for having me, Stella. I have always honored and love to come and speak when you ask me. So thank you for that. And I just want to say thank you for everybody for being so flexible. I apologize for the change in time. It was my fault. I needed to go to do something this morning at my school. So I'm glad you're all here wherever you are. This is kind of odd for me because if you know me, you know that I like to talk with my hands and walk around and give a lot of eye contact. And so this is unique, talking to myself and to a wall. So Stella has shared that she will ask questions once you type them. So please feel free to do that. I'm very excited to be of any support that I can. The only thing that I ask is that we keep them relatively global. Since I don't know most of your kids, it would be very impossible or difficult for me to answer any very personal questions. And for many of you, you have your own BCBA. So I'm sure that if any of this information was of value to you, I'm sure they'd be interested as well. So please feel free to share. So I'm going to talk a little bit about summertime and activities to do in the summertime, but I think it's going to be a little bit more than that. Because as we know right now, it's such an odd time. You know, we want to have our kids go out and do things. We want to go and have our kids have jobs. We want to do all these things, but there are some limitations because of obviously our situation with COVID right now. So I want to think outside the box, and I want us to kind of creatively work together to think about how we can do some of the skills that you probably do every day that you want to teach your kids or your youngsters or your teens in your home. And this is reflective to any age child in your home. What we're going to do is not just think about the activity, but we're going to think about the why of the activity. So I'm just going to go through my slides, and I'm not going to read them because I know we all know how to read. I'm just going to keep talking. So at the end of the day is one of the things that I found super interesting and exciting. Obviously, after 25 years of doing this, one of the things I'm always humbled by is how little I know. Is because at the end of the day, kids keep morphing and learning, and so does the world. And that means that we have to change too. Because as we know, it is never the youth's issue, it's the environmental issue that needs to change. So I've been really working about the last 4 or 5 years, specifically with youth kind of transitioning into the world, transitioning into the community and work. And one of the things that has hit me a lot is kind of looking at some things I said to my kids, my own personal kids, is that there's hard skills, right? The mechanics of learning how to do something. And then what I've really been researching is the soft skills. So I've been really looking at that and looking at some of the issues that have been kind of like a roadblock for some of my youth when they go to work. And as we know, our world is becoming a little bit, step by step, more open to hiring people with unique abilities, because we're learning more about how to support and to coach and to enter the world. But we also I'm finding that there's a sustainability issue sometimes. And some of the youth that I work with, I've been finding over the 4 or 5 years, it's that the mechanical skills may be there, but what's missing is how to, you can get a job and get a skill, but how do you actually maintain that job and long term? So what we're going to be talking a little bit about today is everything that we are going to be doing at home this summer is we're going to be talking a little bit about how to envelop the why and why they're, passing that to your youth or to your learner about why they're doing something. So what we want to think about when I'm talking today is how do we decrease the prompt of the mechanical skills and kind of start to envelop those social emotional skills so the learner understands there's a purpose and there's a meaning for everything they do. Now, I've been a BCBA or a consultant for the last, as Stella said, 25 years. But prior to that, 5-10 years before that, I worked with youth with autism in like the late 80s and 80s, and then into the early 90s, when there was a lot of, you do this because I say so. I need to have instructional control, where I really feel that we have to kind of maybe change that more to cooperative control, because I know that I'm going to fade out of this youth's life. And that's the reality of it. So over the past years, I keep thinking about that, about how do I make myself invisible? How do I let go, but ensure that I'm supporting and respectfully giving the tools to youth and to learners to be able to let go and to have a sustainable skill that's going to be useful throughout their lives. So like I was saying before, it's not just about, and I'm going to talk about jobs for a second here. It's not just about everything we teach is about getting a job. It's about keeping that job. So I was looking up some stats, and this is really interesting, is that I really kind of picked up on the soft skills. That's a little different than social skills. We talk a lot about social skill development, and we think about that. We think about the communication skills, making friends, but that's kind of like that's the small part of it. We're going to talk today about what's the bigger picture outside of that, because where you see on the bottom of this slide is we see 90% of those with disabilities lose their jobs due to the lack of soft skills. And this comes from the associate professor of the rehab counseling at Michigan State University. And I had to dig deep to find this information, because if you look for peer-reviewed journal articles on soft versus hard skills, you're not going to find that much. And that's very exciting to me, is because maybe this is a time for us to start at a really fresh point, to start looking and creating and discussing and kind of collaborating amongst each other about who's really kind of understanding this. Where can we find more value in this? Where can we find more training in this? Me particularly, I really am excited about this, because the last 2 years, it's been the biggest focus of mine working in this private school, is making sure that I always put that together with the mechanical or the hard skills, is those soft skills. So again, here's another just a study from Rowe in 2017, is that over relatively large samples of adults with ASD, only 14% were engaged in paid community employment, and about 25% of all adults had no program at all. So to me, those numbers are not okay. And there is obviously a big problem with that, is because for those of you who know me, know that I'm not shy to say what I feel. And I think that one of the things is that when we go take youth to jobs, we have to think about a couple of different things. We have to think about the fact is, when a youth goes to take a job, the person who is the hirer usually comes with very little skills themselves. We know that we know your child, but people in the community, if your son goes, I'll just pick something, to go work at the dollar store, there is no expectation that the dollar store owner understands how to prompt and how to communicate with our unique learners, right? So we have to make sure that we are going to meet in the middle, that we are going to make sure that our learner and our student, our young worker, comes in with as many skills as possible, because we cannot always assume that our environment knows how to take that and generalize that, right? And also too, is, let's be honest, in today's economy and today's world, a lot of places also want to, example, is going to a dollar store. The first question, and I think this is a great question for like the questionnaire that I made, was the dollar store worker or gentleman said to me that owns it, I need to make sure that I leave at 5 o'clock. So I want to make sure that the job is done well, because I can't stay till 6 o'clock to redo the job. And so yes, the mechanics have to be there to do the job, but also the soft skills, the ability to problem solve, the ability to be creative, the ability to have executive functioning and organizational skills. I started thinking that I need to widen our world of job opportunities for our youth, not make them smaller, because people are saying, when I look at a worker, I want to employ a worker, whether or not this worker has unique needs or not, that's going to actually do the job. And not just in the facility of the physicality, but the social emotional part. So the other reason that I think this is really important to talk about soft skills is just for daily general skills. A lot of times with youth, I have 3 kids myself, is that things that we can practice in the summer are probably things you're already doing, but maybe some of the things that you're doing don't seem to be moving forward. And so it might be that the mechanics are there, but the reason that the child's going to sustain or keep the skill is not there. So what I've been finding is that we need to make sure that we've got purposeful learning with our leisure skills and our life skills are all wrapped into one to understand. So for example, if you take a skill like toothbrushing, a child may have been working on it for a long period of time, the mechanics of it, but that child may not know that they're actually doing it for a bigger whole. So I've tried to really start teaching kids from the beginning when they're brushing their teeth to really describe and to work alongside them, for them to start to understand you're not doing it because I said so. Sometimes I tell kids that Miss Bo doesn't like the social rules of life, and I don't, because sometimes I'm a rule breaker, but I do follow them because I'm a part of a society. So part of society's rules might be that having nice teeth and a nice smile and good breath is going to get you a little further in life. So explaining that and working together, not in a threatening way, but as a proactive way to kind of combine that when you're teaching a child, when you're doing the social stories, is making sure that we're not only just hitting the mechanics, but we're maybe hitting the social emotional part, the connectivity of the why, where they're doing it. It takes a little bit longer, but it's so, so worth it to help the youth or the teen understand why they're doing something. Therefore, we're including them in their learning rather than just teaching them a skill because it's necessary and we quickly need to get to the next skill. Because the skills will move forward and faster and be more sustainable when I'm not there or when they're grown up and you're not there, because there's a purpose and a remembering and a connectivity of why to do it, not just I'm doing it because I was taught to do it. Going down. So some of the things that we note that we know that are missing within our learners is the executive functioning, the organizational skills. We know that short-term memory is a really big problem. So one of the things I talk a lot about is the episodic memory. A lot of times when I teach, I try to make a connection. It's like you and I, for example, if I say to you, black cat, close your eyes for a second, everybody, and think of a black cat. If you think of one, you might think of one you saw on the street crossing yesterday. You might think that it's bad luck. But our learners might just go back to thinking of the black cat they had as a child, and that's the only thought they have. So they tend to sometimes not broaden their thoughts, but keep them actually very small and not have those different episodic thoughts that you and I have, those different memories that come through your life. That's super important for learning and sustaining that learning. So within executive functioning and organizational skills, it's not just that I want a child or a youth to learn, here's your folder, keep it nice in there because it's good. It's more about making sure that they understand that their lives are going to change. Their lives will be easier. And this is not just a skill for this day in high school, but it's going to be a skill for your entire life. So when you explain that, sometimes some youth connect with that, understanding that, oh, I see you're teaching me this, is because it's actually going to be something I do when I'm 20, 30, 40, and 50. A folder in high school is one thing, but developing executive functioning and organizational skills is a lifelong skill. And explaining that to youth and taking that time for them to understand it is extremely beneficial. Social experiences are really, really big too. We sometimes think about the hard skills, making sure that we understand and know how to work on our ABA skills and our skills of academics, but knowing that we can always take those and make them relevant is very important. So every time I teach a math lesson in my school, I keep thinking in my head, how is this going to be applicable? Is this child going to use it, and where are they going to use it? How do we make this interesting for a kid if they're not interested? That's huge. I mean, like I said, I'm a parent. If my kid's not interested in trigonometry, no matter how much song and dance and bribery I do, they're not going to do better if they have no purpose or understanding why. And so with social experiences, example right now would be is I'm working with a young man who is struggling with numeracy and literacy together, but we know how important that is. So every time I'm doing numeracy and literacy with him, I'm making a story only about him, about situation that happens to him, and the math and the numeracy together are interesting to him because it actually is happening to him. So there's a pull into learning about it rather than doing a worksheet about Tom and Bill went to the store, he bought 20 apples and Bill bought 80 apples. Everything's about him and the situation at hand. And immediately after we learn that math skill, we're going out within that same session and practicing it. Because again, that forms that episodic memory. The minute you learn something and apply it, it stays right here. If we do a math problem and do nothing with it till the next week's math session, we cannot blame our learner for not retaining that information because it wasn't important to them in the moment. I love self-advocacy. I think that is one of the biggest lacking skills for youth to be able to not be seen as behavioral, but advocating. This is so important for me to retain the information for all of us, to know if a student is saying no, if a student is saying I can't, it doesn't mean they're being lazy, oppositional, or we have no instructional control. It is meaning that something is up and the child is trying to tell you. But the problem is if we don't teach self-advocacy skills from the beginning, it can come across as a child perhaps getting frustrated. That frustration may turn into physicality. And that, as we know, is not okay in our environment, because I don't know any place, any store, whether it's a grocery store or a convenience store or a coffee store, that is going to be okay with somebody grabbing, right? That is where our youth or our population will get fired or people get scared immediately. So teaching a way to say, stop, I don't understand you, please say it again, is so important. And I always tell my learners in my personal classroom is, Miss Bo, I'm from Chicago, I speak super fast. I get that. I need you to raise your hand and tell me to slow down. And they're like, oh, I'm scared to do that because you might get mad. No, I'm not going to get mad, but I'll get frustrated and maybe disappointed when I don't know, when you don't hand in your homework tomorrow because you didn't understand what I was asking you to do. Now, if you take that advocacy and you take it to the community and you take it to work, if a youth is not able to tell their boss or their supervisor because they're scared or don't know how, and they're saying yes, and the boss is saying, do you understand? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. And nothing gets done. We're having this incredible round robin of frustration. The boss is frustrated, the youth is frustrated, and we're doing a lot of fixing where we know we need to be very proactive from the beginning, because we know it's better, it's more efficient, it's more economical than fixing something in the end. Because if you've got to fix something later, the frustration has already happened. We are undoing negative behaviors rather than taking that time to teach appropriate positive behaviors. And self-advocacy is a huge, huge area of problem solving and communication within our soft skill model. The I canness to me is extremely important within a skill, because at the end of the day, as we probably know, and some of you may know, some of your learners or some of your own kids that may be able to start a project, but get very frustrated when they don't know how to make it come to fruition. So what happens is they might get in the beginning and then you leave because you're trying to give them some independence and you're trying to kind of, back away, not be so prompt dependent. But the minute you're gone, the pencil's down. The minute you're gone, the work is not being done, because that learner has become so attached to you and this that the I canness and the ability to finish something isn't there. That's kind of sort of married with a self-determination. The self-determination is something that, again, when I'm talking about these, I hope you're kind of starting to feel too, we all have these skills too. This is not something foreign to us. This is what we had to do to be social members of the community, right? This is what we need to pass on to our youth because they're not different. They're the same. We just have to teach them differently, and it might take a little bit longer. Self-determination is really, really difficult. Self-determination means if I don't get it one way, I've got to try a plan B. If plan B doesn't work, I've got to try a plan C. And we know, all of us, when we get to plan C, I know myself, like when it comes to baking, excuse me, or cooking something, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm the worst. There's like 3 things I know how to make. And I try to pretend for my kids I know how to make it, and they will pretend to eat it. But like, I'll give up. I'll give up after I've made this thing 5 times and it still doesn't taste good. I won't go 6 or 7 or 8 times because I don't have the self-determination to do it. I don't have the motivation to be better at it. So we all lack it, but somehow we're able to pull it together in our jobs. So in a generalized place, we may not be great at it, but at your work, if you can be self-determined to get through something, that's going to get you very far with work or the skills that are necessary, right? And then again, when I go to problem solving, to me, that's one of the biggest skills. Every morning at school, I come with a problem every single day. My kids must think that I have problems constantly, but I will come with a problem every morning because I want my youth to know that I'm a human being. I want my youth to know that I have problems too, that you are not the only ones having a problem. So I can actually exemplify and model and shape that everybody has problems. Let's work together how to solve it. I will even do things sometimes like spill coffee on myself, which is not actually pretend because I do it all the time, get to school, and before we even start learning, I'm going to go, hey guys, Miss Bo spilled coffee all over herself. What can I do? And they're like, you can drive home. And I'm like, well, I live an hour and a half from school. Can't do that. What should I do next? And we will model it and draw it. Every moment is a teaching moment. That is part of the soft skill education. It is not just sitting down going, well, we're going to be talking about problem solving right now. It is inserting it to the entire part of your day. So when you're starting to think about your summer, it's not just going to be sitting down and doing a project or a skill. It's going to be instilling all of your day in the summer, trying to instill these skills. Because by the time my kids grafted and drew, I couldn't go home. Maybe I can have a different shirt. I didn't have a different shirt. Somebody looked up, Miss Bo, there's something called Tide to Go. We were like, okay, Tide to Go. Where do we get it? And they're like, hey, at the Save-On, it's 2 blocks away. I'm like, all right, let's go. So we all got up, went to those Save-On together and solved their problem immediately. And that was usually the first 15 to 20 minutes of class, because to me, that is just as important, if not as important as ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Because if you have those skills, the hard skills, but you don't practice these other skills, it is very easy to become complacent and say, if plan A doesn't work, oh well, I have no plan B. And I have to say, such a sense of pride, even through learning e-learning like this with on Zoom. I think out of the 90 days or whatever we did on Zoom, I think maybe 1 learner missed 1 day, because the importance for them to continue learning came from them, not from me saying, please come to Zoom tomorrow. But the kids were so excited to continue learning. It showed that the EAs and the staff and all of us had hopefully provided them with an exciting reason to keep coming to school, because it was going to connect with them and teach them skills that they were so excited in using, and would tell me the next day or talk to their peers about what they did, which then made it a conversation skill or a conversation tool around them, because they were able to speak the same language. And it's the exact same language that you and I talk about at coffee breaks at work, before work, after work with our friends, life, relationship issues, problem solving. Our youth need to practice it to be given the, I don't want to say the word permission, but I can't think of a different permission, to know it's okay to talk about this. Because if we do math for 15 minutes, but had a great conversation for half an hour about something that meant something to you, that is going to enhance them to be able to be sustainable and ongoing members of the society.
Okay, Bo.
Yes.
Hey, Bohdanna. There is a question from Nancy, and the question is about something that may affect the understanding of soft skills. It's quite a long question, so I'll read it out.
Sure.
So Nancy asks, interesting research is coming from the University of Edinburgh about the communication modes of autistic and non-autistic individuals, and the disconnect that happens when these communication modes intersect. What do you think of the theory of differing communication modes, which is part of the Damian Milton's double empathy problem. That is when people with very experiences of the world interact, they struggle to empathize with each other. How does this affect the understanding of soft skills?
Wow. Nancy, thank you for your very in-depth question. And I'm going to be honest, I do not know that, and I will look that up. And if you can please leave that that paper from Edinburgh, I'd be very interested in looking at it. I think that I think most youth, not most, that's an overgeneralization. Many youth with autism, I think, are thinking about what they're going to say before you're even done with your sentence sometimes, because a lot of the episodic memory and their excitement and their values are based on what interests them. And I think that when you see, part of this is, it takes a long time. And part of it is really, Nancy, working on some kinds of connections that start with very, very short periods of time of learning. When I first went to teach, and because I hadn't really taught in a school outside of Harmony House, but when I went first to teach at the high school, what I felt is maybe using a word that you just shared was, I had 6 learners, but 6 learners that were disconnected. They came from different values, different relationships, different schools, so they didn't know anything about each other. So in the beginning, we did a lot of modeling, a lot of visuals, a lot of games that was based on teaching them about each other. And what they got very excited about was, when we used the visuals, we found like almost in a Venn diagram that they were finding what things are similar about themselves as well as what things were different. So they could actually talk about the similarities, but find out about the differences in using different kinds of questions. We started out with the most bare minimal questions, but most people don't even know how to ask a question. Most people don't even know how to gather information. We teach a lot of rote information, like, with all due respect, myself as well. Come to the table. What's your name? Bill. Okay, go play, right? And so at the end of the day we made this into a process and a program. So maybe my social studies program would have been just learn about each other. And it would have gone on for 6 weeks. And because of that, kids got very excited, because then I made it, instead of a token system, I put up a connection system. So I kind of took away giving them reinforcers of little tokens, but they got so excited when I would be like, wait a minute, you went to the mall and John went to the mall. What can you ask? And they would just have very simple questions like, did you go to, I don't know malls, sorry, Brookwood Mall? And if a child said yes, I would give a tally of a connection. And what I think the most important thing, if you can take anything away from this, is the building of connections. I don't think we take enough time to build those connections, which we can then take as a child gets older to teaching them something called the social fake. Like right now, I can be nodding at you when you're telling me an interesting story, but I could be smiling and nodding and going, I'm thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner. And I'm wondering if we're going on holiday, but I'm feigning interest, right? All those skills are extremely important, because you shouldn't know that I don't care about you, right? Nobody, and our kids are sometimes black and white, and they will be like, I'm done. That's boring. Want to talk about something different? And so that to me is something we have to teach a lot. And that's why I'm saying in the summer, I'm not going to ask you maybe to teach your child to load a dishwasher. I'm going to ask you to build, well, I might. I'm going to ask you to build those communication visuals and skills, so then all those things are being taught are connectivity things. Whether it's reading a book with a child, whether it's making dinner next to your child, you're going to be bringing up things for them to ask a question about. It's about being present. It's about allowing that child to know, like I said with my kids, every day I have a problem. So the kids started connecting, going, oh, you're not just teaching us how to solve our problems. I was asking them to solve my problems, right? So that back and forth and that connectivity is very important. Even if you're making dinner at night, you're talking to your child or making cartoons or visuals about, when I used to make this with my mom, oh, I used to need this visual board too. Or when I used to make this with my mom, I always burned it. And when the child goes, oh, I burned the dinner, they're not going, oh, you've never done that. How can somebody connect with you if they don't know everything about you? So I don't know if that answers your question holistically, but that when I bring you up the soft skills diagram, I think it might give you a little bit more idea, at least, about ways to connect and envelop yourself with every single thing you do during the day that helps your learner or your child know that this is just not a program. This is not about being on duty or off duty, in a program, out of a program, sitting at a table, away from a table. It is an ongoing methodology that, like, for example, when I'm in class, it is all day, every day. Whenever a child talks to me, whenever we're teaching anything, it is based on me thinking in my head, how is this going to be generalized? How is this child going to use it? If it is a stretch or a difficulty for a child, how do I embrace that skill and bring it back up? But I'm going to tell you right now, I truly believe that everything starts with connectivity. Without having a connection to the learning, without having a connection to the teacher or the person who's teaching it, without taking that time and being patient, it's a lot harder to do. So a lot of it comes from patience. I hope I helped a little bit.
Hi, Bohdanna.
Hi.
Hello. Leah has a question, a small question. She said, this school sounds great. Where is it located?
Well, Leah, if you, they're not accepting new students, but if you email me later, I will be more than happy to share that. But I'm feeling that maybe right now, I don't want to kind of go off topic and share the school, but then, you know what I mean? Because I don't think they're taking students right now. I'm sorry about that. But can I answer this question? Every school should be doing this. I don't know if every school should really understand that every basis class, this is what I believe. This is my proclamation, because I think it can be done. I think that we need to go into this, 2020, 2021, recognizing that every class and everything that you do with a learner is not about occupying time. It's about having a teachable moment. And it's not about making the child feel like they're being drilled about this or it's artificial. It's about bringing that joy and harmoniousness and that connection. I keep saying that word, so the child feels that there's a purpose and they're part of that purpose. It also means about pulling the child in and making them be a part of it. And I use a lot of humor. I use a lot of visuals. I use a lot, again, I connect with the kids is because they know a lot about me. Like, for example, when I was Zooming all this last 90 days, I have 3 kids of my own. I bring my kids in. One boy I work with loves Tintin. Well, so does my son. So I brought him in to sit with the Zoom and they talk Tintin books. Like, I just pulled my kid in because he was walking by. It was just right thing, right moment. It's not about having a book and going, did this drill, did this drill. We have to kind of, from my opinion, move away from that with some of our learners and really recognize. Now, again, everybody's a different learner, and I'm not saying that there's one way that's wrong or right, but I believe for the social emotional part, where I found the most benefit is the inclusivity and the consistent discussions and humor, and looking at, like, the other day we did Toddler Tuesday, and the kids brought pictures of themselves, and I brought a picture of myself, and then kids were like, but Miss Bo, when were you little? And I was like, this is 50 years ago. So they were like, quickly got their calculators and we're doing when was 50 years ago. So all of a sudden, this beautiful humanity session about what we look like, or this personal moment, turned into a math moment, right? But I didn't say, get your calculators out, we're gonna do math. They were so interested with me leading the questions, going, wow, that was 50 years ago. I can't even remember what year that was. And they were so excited to figure it out and who was going to be the first one to do it so they can share that. But that's because every moment becomes a moment that maybe I didn't scribe. I didn't go, I'm going to do this lesson hoping that this is going to become a math lesson. But when it became a math lesson, I don't say, we're not doing math right now, right? That's the part of the social emotional learning, is because that's what happens with me or you. When we're at a party or a social situation, somebody brings something up and you hear it, you join them because you are busy navigating. You're always on duty. That's what we have to teach our students to do. Like in this one, I love this this slide, because this is from Lara and Osborne, relatively early, is that what we do, we have to pass, right? Understanding what we do and how we do it are the mechanics and the skill set. But knowing how the work we do fits into a bigger picture, what I do in my job and who I become becomes meaningful to the company. So one of my youth was working in a very big company. It was not her style. She had been put there to work in a very big company, but nobody had really done like maybe a preference assessment to ask her where she wanted to be. She wanted to be in a thrift store, in a small place, one-to-one with somebody, because that's where she felt most comfortable. So as soon as we found that, she became a part of the whole, because the lady that she was working for was heavily pregnant. So she used her soft skills because she could navigate that. She felt more comfortable navigating that to say, this lady's heavily pregnant. I'm going to help her more by climbing the ladder. Not something I know how to do to get high things, but I'm going to do it. Perhaps I'm going to ask her to see if she wants a cup of tea, because I could see I'm navigating that it's hard for her when she's on her feet all day. When she was at a big company with 60 people working very quickly, she was struggling with finding and getting those navigational skills because the world was moving too fast for her at that point. I'm not saying that's not going to be where she can be, or 2 to 3 years if she chooses. But what we have to do is do a preference assessment and ensure that the tools she has are being utilized and that she's comfortable. Because if you and I are put somewhere where we don't want to be, nobody's going to be happy. Nobody tells you that you're going to wipe tables at Panago if you don't want to. You're not going to be the best person there because nobody asked you. That's what we have to do with our youth. We have to make sure that the jobs are going to be purposeful and they go in with as many tools as possible. And one of those tools is the desire to be there, right? I love being a teacher. I love teaching. I'm so lucky to do that. But if you put me at NASA, I wouldn't be super happy because I don't want to be around space people, right? So that's really important. It is important to understand why you're there, because you will push yourself. So this is a little story about me. Don't tell anybody I do this, but during my time at school, I work all the time. I don't take breaks because that's my personality. But at lunchtime, I find that I need a little bit, like 15 minutes to just kind of decompress, right? But at school, there's a lunchroom, and that's where people go and chat and talk. But for me, that is not reinforcing because I need that 15 minutes alone. I put my music in, I go downstairs. But I also know as a worker, you need to show up sometimes. So once every couple of weeks on a Thursday, I might bring cupcakes and go into the staff room because it's important to show face. That is a soft skill, right? That is not a mechanical skill. That's a skill to go, I'm going to do something perhaps that's not comforting for me, but to maintain my social ability with my peers and to look like I'm a part, you need to show up sometimes. And as we know, a lot of our youth struggle with that because they will ask me, well, Miss Bo, I don't want to bring food to the Wednesday staff meetings because I don't bring the food they eat. Why should I bring food, right? And that's when we have these great discussions about talking, is that I hear what you're saying, validate, always validate. But in our society, to continue to make friends, it's about showing face. And that in itself can be a 2-week summer lesson. Cartooning it, talking about it, going out to a store with your child. You could be saying, see that guy? Look at his face. Did you see the way that lady helped him reach something? Every moment is about looking to see what our environment does. So this in soft skill environmental teaching is about providing visuals or tools so kids start to see the purposefulness of it. If I only went to work at Starbucks and pour coffee but never spoke to anybody, I'd be a very lonely Starbucks worker. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. And that's
Bohdanna.
Yes.
There's another question. Sorry to cut you off.
Okay.
Yeah. So Susanna wanted to ask, she said, often my child is not interested in my problems. She means the problems that you suggest we share, and her son is 18 years old. And
Right.
She asked, how might I get him interested?
You know what? I think that, and Suzanne, I don't know your exact issue, but I think that in the beginning, I started with making my problems very, very small. And I think that sometimes, and I'm a very verbose person, I've had to learn to read my audience and make sure that I started with very small successes. And sometimes those successes don't look like they're successes at all, if that makes sense. So even though your child may not look like he's interested in your problems, maybe the problems are maybe just a little bit too big right now, and he's not yet capable to solve them. So perhaps starting with even a smaller problem, maybe the problem would be that I don't know if your son's taller than you, but even for your son to reach up and get you a coffee mug that's on the third shelf that you kind of sabotage the situation and let him do something for you, all you're doing at that point is saying, Johnny, can you get that for mom? She can't reach it. And then you're going to go, thanks for solving my problem. That's the first step, because sometimes we think solving problems is a spectrum, just like most things we teach is a spectrum. You might be over here looking for empathy and caring, and your son might be over here going, I don't want to hear about that yet. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you might have to rewind a little bit, starting at a little bit simplistic things and building from there. Because trust me, I get it too. In the beginning, when I told stories about my water not being on at my house, I couldn't take a shower, my kids were like, so what, at school? And I was like, I need to make it visual. That's when I poured the coffee on my shirt. And then they thought it was so funny. I used the humor for them to solve it. And then the solving my problem became a reinforcement by all of us being gone to Safeway. And when we went to Safeway to solve my problem, they each bought a piece of gum or did something for themselves, because, you know what I mean? You've got to leave it also too with people wanting more. I hope that helps. Should I keep going? Time goes so fast. So anyways, so I think the big picture is, for all of us who work, the third part is very big for me, is that even when you work for a long time, you start to develop a sense of pride. And the sense of pride in your work is part of the soft skill. It's not just the mechanics. The sense of pride goes with maybe after you've been somewhere for a while, like at the grocery store at Nestor's, there's one right by my house. The sense of pride goes with, there's a young man that works with, at my school, when people start to ask you out, like at a home sense, people start to ask you out, hey, we're going to go out and have, coffee after work. You want to go? And my guy's like texting me going, they asked me for coffee, right? Because work should also be a social place to a certain degree. I'm not saying every friend in your life has to come from work, but let's be honest. If you work somewhere for 20 years and nobody's your friend and you don't like anybody, you're a very lonely worker. So I think that this book by Lauren Osborne, I can't remember the name of the book, but that's the author's, is a great book. I highly suggest that everybody buy this book. I have a copy of it, and later I'll tell Stella the name of it. For some reason, I didn't put it up. I apologize. But relationships, development, connectivity, and I'm not just talking about the youth that are very good communicators. My practice, I work with youth that speak on talkers, and I work with youth that are going to university. The spectrum is huge. I don't believe that there is not a place for everybody. I believe even youth that are working at a place where their skills are limited, where we have to still use a lot of visuals. And I'm working with a young man like that right now on a local store here on Main Street. And the people on Main Street have also become his family. It may have taken a little bit longer to teach them visuals, to teach them the specific words, but when you have buy-in, it's amazing. But you won't have buy-in if the people at the store don't know how to interact with the learner or the worker, right? If they're talking to you instead of the worker. It reminds me of being at school when kids are little and the kid at kindergarten will say to a EA, do you think Johnny wants to do Play-Doh? And we're going, well, why don't you just ask Johnny, right? Our environment works off of fear and the unknown. Our job is to take our learner with as many tools as possible to make sure that the environment and that person feels comfortable. There's a lot that goes with it. That's a whole other talk about how to get buy-in. But as much as possible, if we can meet in the middle with people, but have those soft skills, one of them being flexibility, which is a huge soft skill, right? Because if you're happy at Costco being in aisle 28, but your boss says, hey, all the boxes fell off on aisle 29, you're going, but I'm aisle 28. Nobody's going to be your best friend when that person has to be working all on their own, but your aisle is pristine, right? There's ways to teach that to any child. Flexibility can be taught to anybody through visuals, through discussion, any way. It just takes time and in vivo practice, right? So I think everybody knows when I'm talking about hard skills versus soft skills, about the difference, right? I use this example about soft skills are different from hard skills, which are directly relevant to the job to which you're applying, right? So for example, a hard skill for a carpenter would be the ability to operate a power saw or use a framing square. Now, I like this a lot because I like to talk about the fact is that I think the reason we didn't really teach soft skills was because we used to think as a population that if we taught Johnny to sweep at Winners, Johnny would know how to sweep at, I'm going to say Target because I'm American, Target. But there's a huge difference. Why? The difference is that there are different people with different lives and different beliefs, different demographics, different likes and different dislikes at different places. You might be a great sweeper at one place and they know you, but if you go someplace else, somebody might not be okay with you not being chatty. Somebody might not be okay with you not being flexible. So if we only teach a child to sweep all day long and nothing else and no soft skills of flexibility, he might be successful at one place because he's sweeping in the morning before the store opens or after the store's closed. But if we have to go to a store where there's people and somebody's going to go, do you know where the milk is? And he goes, I'm the sweeper. Why would you ask me? That person's not going to have a long-term job. Nobody just does one task. Look at your job. No matter how specific your job is, somebody's always going to ask you something. Somebody's always going to require something different of you. We are not robots for human beings. Somebody's going to ask you directions. They're not just going to ask you if you're working behind a desk about a computer. They might ask you a personal question. They might be having a hard day and they might need you to just look at them and go, you okay? Right? That's important everywhere we go.
Bohdanna?
So, yes.
Bohdanna, there's a question from Andrea from Facebook. Andrea asks, is it teaching pre-employment skills to 14 to 17 years old?
The book? I think that if she's asking me if that's the name of the book, it is.
Okay. Maybe Andrea can elaborate because that's a question on Facebook. Thank you, Bohdanna.
I think that's the name of the book if that's what you were asking, Andrea. If not, throw another question out. So again, I think I went over that. And I think that one of the things that I really like about soft skills too is the idea behind it that you're not just forming a relationship with other people, you're forming a relationship with yourself. I think it's really important because without getting teary, school ended and I gave all my students cards. And one of the things we always have the mantra is, I want you to look in the mirror every morning and remind yourself how capable you are, how smart you are, how important you are, right? Because there comes a time sometimes in our lives where people are not reinforcing us all the time, right? And so a lot of times if you're a parent or you're a teacher, we use reinforcement techniques, but there comes a time where a child or a youth needs to know, I'm proud of what I'm doing myself without you giving me something. Yes, we all get paychecks and I believe in that reinforcement because it's very important. But if your child's on a reinforcement or token system, as you get older, that token system needs to look different. So taking the time for the child, inserting those words, instead of saying, I'm proud of you, turning it around to say, you should be really proud of yourself. You did that. That's very cool. Really reflecting of how we're reinforcing so the learner understands, don't stop what you're doing because somebody's not going, good job all the time, because that's not how our world works. I wish it did, because I love reinforcement and I love telling people how awesome they are, but I don't want somebody to think because I didn't say you're awesome that you're not awesome anymore. And that's important. So here's the soft skills chart that this is a new one that came out. These are the benefits of soft skills, which I think are super important. So if you could probably, this is not a word, but I like it. You can probably biggerize it. But if you look at some of the soft skills, we're looking at positivity, engagement, change, responsibility. I look at things like time management. I think I've got a story here. Oh, here we go. About all these skills, what these skills that your child's going to get by being able to use the soft skills. Now, there's a lot of different visuals on soft skills that you can find. Those were just the benefits of soft skills. But if you look online, you will find there are 7 really powerful soft skills: leadership, communication skills, time management, communication in general, advocacy. Those are all really important soft skills. That last slide just shows you what are the benefits of soft skills. And it's cool because when I was looking at that, I kind of looked to myself, because I think about one of the ones I really like is being present. Because one of the things I don't like, and I think that that's one of my Achilles heel, is when I'm talking to somebody, but they're looking over me or past me to see what's better. Do you know what I mean? And I know that when talking, my youngest child is just graduating this year. And I know that conversations that we have sometimes are, the fact is that when she's talking with her friends, or she's like, I can tell when they're not like interested in what I'm saying, right? And that becomes an awkward moment, right? So I think that being present and being available, that's that kind of like, even that I call it the social fake. And some of my older kids that I still keep in contact with, that are out of high school, out of college, in their late 20s, I still text them. I still keep in contact with a lot of kids. They will like laugh and tell me stories about how they use a social fake, or how they went to a party. One girl recently told me how she just met her boyfriend with kind of a social fake. She's like, I was not interested in anything he was saying, but I thought he was cute. I was like, right on, right? So a lot of these skills are very important. And I know that you all use them. And I'm not saying we're going to teach every single skill. You're going to look at where your child's needs are going to be. But just think about like things like clarity. If I don't know what you're trying to tell me, how do I know you're going to be able to tell that to your boss? If you're thinking right now, my kid's a good communicator, but sometimes maybe he misses telling me the full sentence or the problem, maybe that's something you can work up on over the summer. Maybe that's a skill that you can kind of compartmentalize and say, that's a skill I want to use because I'm using this chart. Maybe your child's not a good listener. Maybe your child doesn't value things, like, maybe your child doesn't know. Like right now, a mom that I work with recently emailed me and said, this is so interesting. I gave him $5 for doing his job. And he was saying like, oh, I'm $5. I could buy like a house or a car. And she's like, you can more likely buy a candy bar. He was shocked. And so I thought, going into the world, you need to know what things cost, right? Because you don't want to walk in somewhere and be shocked to know that you don't know something, right? So yes, that's a part of a math skill, but it's also part of a soft skill. Again, going back to everything you teach should be valuable. Everything you're teaching with your child over the summer should be generalized and should be valued, that they can take one of the skills you taught them and use it to apply to the next skill, right? Hope that's helpful. Here's like a little bit of an example. I have a young worker, and this is his first job, grade 11, and he was very excited to go there. The uniform, working, that's all very exciting, right? But that's also very much the hard skills, getting your uniform. He's very excited about what outfit he's going to wear, and understands his job, what he's going to do. We've taught that at school, at the grocery store. So, for example, so work starts at 8 o'clock, just like for most of us. Other workers come at 7:50. They like to have a coffee, chat before work. I'm sure most of you do that as well, because once 8 o'clock happens, chat stops. So my worker comes at 8 because he is a black and white thinker. Work on a schedule. It says right here, he said, on my contract, it starts at 8. He wonders why, excuse me, the other workers are angry that he's starting to have a coffee at 8 o'clock when they started their task. And he says to me, but it says here at 8 o'clock. So we took some time to talk about the unwritten rules of life, right? The unwritten rules say you're on the floor at 8, but you're finding your locker, going to the bathroom and chatting before work starts. My student was frustrated that he was getting mean looks, right? And I had to tell him, well, you kind of deserve the mean looks, because look and navigate what they're doing. They're working and you're coming in at 8 just to put your stuff away. People get paid. So we drew it out for him. People get a paycheck for starting at 8. You don't start till 8:05. But the problem had also been because the boss, and for those of you that know me, I use this a lot, allowed him to be a special snowflake. The boss was like, no, Miss Bo, it's okay. I know he's new, and I know that it's hard for him sometimes to understand the rules. If he comes late, I won't dock him. But I don't want to be mean. I want my kid to be docked, because at the end of the day, when he leaves this job and goes to another job, he's going to be docked, right? So we need to take the time. So over summer, we're going to work with him on different problem solving skills. I write things and send it to him, and he sends me back ways on how we can solve those problems. Again, I don't always like the rules of life, and there's a lot of hidden curriculum. But if I just taught him to shelve at the store, but didn't teach him the hidden rules of being there early or starting exactly at 8 o'clock, or nothing wrong with starting at 7:59, right? This has nothing to do with the mechanics of skills. This has to do with navigating and understanding that grocery store. And if you leave that grocery store and go to the exact same chain, but a different grocery store with a different person, there's going to be different rules, right? Because there's different people. So it is always important to make sure that we teach as many soft skills as possible and generalize them, and teach our youth to understand that there's going to be different rules in different places, even if the place looks the same, right? So it sounds complicated, but again, I think it's really important to look at what you're doing with your kids over the summer. And like, again, even if you're doing it with younger learners, there's different ways you can sabotage situations. Even ways like working on dinner time, right? I have a family that their son always gets served first, so he stays happy. And I said, this summer, let's work on him maybe being served second or last, or maybe he serves his mom, right? Teaching different ways to do that is a huge skill, because when you go to different dinner parties, the world's not going to stop because he pushes his way to the front of the line, right? That's a huge skill. Those kind of things are important. So think about any way you could teach your child to be flexible, to be open-minded, to be able to see things in a much different way, so they could take that skill and go someplace else. You guys,
hey, Bohdanna, sorry to cut you off again.
Not cutting me off.
There's another question. So Maylan want to ask what to do when young adults are no longer willing to listen or to do things they learn to do at therapy, but are deciding to do it the simpler way, as my son put it out. And she topped it off with some more personal experience. She said, my son is very upset now. We don't understand why. When we are trying to help, he doesn't want to help and is not following what he has learned, even washing his hands.
Right. You know, I think that the word help is an interesting word. I think sometimes help for some kids can also be a synonym to embarrassment and frustration. Even though we are, you know, your son's a youth, you know, with autism, he's still a youth and probably a teen. And I always think of kids are kids first, and they kind of struggle also with a lot of different emotions. So sometimes it might not be that he's not accepting the information. And with all due respect, I don't know what's happening. It might be that the information is coming to him in a way where he's not able to accept it. And I don't know if that makes a difference. It kind of goes back to, and maybe it might help the case study that I have next might be of use to answer your question more. But even as a parent, and my kids are such different ages, I'm finding that sometimes I state the obvious, or I assume they're not going to do it before they even do it, and then I shut them down. So sometimes it's about stepping back and taking data on yourself, and that's hard. I understand that, and there's a lot of humility in it to go, it's maybe not my child's not listening, but maybe it's a different way of exposing him to understanding the why than we've done in the past. Maybe it's not that we need him to be compliant or listening to instructional information. Maybe there's a way we can bring a pamphlet from a job and go like, hey, I was looking at this job. This is interesting what they say to do. There's a little bit of sabotage we have to do, or a little bit, I call it backdoor approach, because sometimes if a kid's heard it 500 times, they start to shut down because they're not learning it anymore. That to them is not the way that they want to interpret that information. So they build a wall, or they become like a, what am I thinking? Like an iron, you know, in front of them, and they don't want to hear that information. So it feels like they're being non-compliant, but they're maybe not able to communicate with you in a nice way, or in a way that they're in the moment that I can't take that information anymore. And then we have to back off and think about how are we going to reevaluate, though it seems like we're going back to the beginning. but we might be reevaluating how we're providing that information and how the child's able to process or youth process that information. This might help.
Bohdanna,
Yes.
sorry. So Millen wants to let you know that her son is 21 years old.
Thank you.
And then there's another parent that said that like her daughter has the exact same issue, that she wants her independence no matter the cost. So there are two parents experience the same issue with their adult kid.
I think
a young adult kid or a teenager.
Yeah, like 21-ish. Yeah. And I think that, also too, is I don't know your kids' experiences. A lot of times kids are experiencing that their peers or friends or people around them are more independent, right?
Yeah.
Or they might.
Sorry, Bo. One parent's child is 14 years old. One is 14, the other one 21.
Right, that's a big difference. But I think that also too is you have to remember our kids navigate more than we know, right? And I think that sometimes I always find as a parent, less is more. Just giving as least information as possible. I find that sometimes things don't work because we're actually giving our kids way too much information and they're not able to take it, so then they back off. I think about being creative, and maybe this might help you a little bit, the next part. So if it doesn't, we can continue the question, but let's see if this might support some of your questions a little bit. So I have a case study, and let's talk about this young man. I just want to give this as an example to maybe spark some interest of what are some summer things to do. So I've got a young man, and he is in grade 11, and he's got some strengths. He loves filming and making videos, which I think that a lot of autistic youth enjoy doing because it's very visual. A lot of our kids like YouTube, gaming, things like that. He's got a very good work ethic. He does want to see things come to fruition. Now the word is want. He wants to see things come to fruition. He enjoys direct instruction and feedback. So he likes when somebody's there providing the what's next, what's next, what's next. He doesn't push away from that. He actually is, I wouldn't say the word is prompt dependent, but he's dependent on instructions. And then he loves drama and acting, and he enjoys helping others. Those are his strengths. His stretches, or what we used to call weaknesses, are getting started, where to begin, the executive functioning. So working on his own. So up top, he loves a direction, but when the direction ends, he struggles. So when I'm gone, or when the Zoom goes off, I'm not 100% sure things are coming to fruition that he wanted, because he will struggle with me not being there physically or an EA not being there. Organization, like I said, finding information to support his learning. This is huge in high school. I see a lot of high schoolers really struggle with referencing and understanding how to use tools, how to gather information, whether it's the internet, newspaper, the outside world, and doing what he says he'll do. He wants to do it. He doesn't always have the tools to do it, right? There's that short-term working memory deficits, or when somebody's not giving him the information, he gets stuck and may then procrastinate and leave it, okay? So I use a methodology called teaching versus telling. I don't know if this is going to help the other questions, is that something by Durlock. It's kind of a social skills teaching. Now, I find this interesting because soft skills and social skills sometimes marry, but they also are quite different. So in the beginning, I start with a SAFE, the sequence step-by-step approach, active learning, participating in vivo and in the community. So making sure that I teach you something, and then you're able to see how it's valuable in the community. F is the focus, time, and attention on social skills training, which is soft skills, meaning what I talked about before. This is not just like, hey, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to have a session. It's about me talking to I'm going to use this case study, me talking to this individual, this young man, and saying, okay, we're going to break this down across the week. I'm only talking to you every other Thursday. We're going to learn how every day you can participate in this skill, so then it gets done. We'll talk about why. And then the explicit goals. What's the goal? So I needed to give a goal to this youth. This is the purposefulness. Because if I'm just going to ask this youth to do something with no goal, we're going to find out that we're in a circle of continuing prompting, because why not? I like your prompts. I like you telling me what to do. And he doesn't know that I'm going to go away someday. And he doesn't know he's going to grow up. I mean, he does, But like the rest of a lot of teenagers, they think things are just going to happen. They want to be independent. Who cares? I don't have the skills. It's just going to happen, right? Because a lot of our youth don't navigate to see how hard it is to be able to get an apartment. They have no idea, to be able to get a job. All of this sounds good, but the work behind it is what's missing. Okay. So going back to the teaching, not telling.
Bohdanna, that's another question. I'm sorry.
No.
So, Linda from Facebook, she said, it's a little earlier than what you have said. I have questions about you just mentioned teaching your client soft skill, like work at 8 a.m., but he was confused about came early than 8 a.m. for all preparation. Based on this critical confusion for the client, I think that we can teach the skill more flexible about this job. That is, add preparation time, pre-time, and be flexible based on the actual job environment, etc.
Was that a question or was that a comment? I think it was a comment. Is that right?
You can decide, or you can make a comment.
I think that, well, actually, I think it was a comment, and I think it was very valuable, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you. Right there, it sounds to me like that is the great skills to teach those, the pre-skills, and talk about what are the reasons why, and those are great reasons why. And I think that within, whoops, my computer's dying. Within that on its own, I think that those are great skills to be able to tell a learner about the why. I never want to tell somebody to do something because I said so. Like, I grew up in that kind of environment, right? Just do it because I said so. So I don't think I was as prepared as I probably could have been, and made a lot more mistakes when I left home at 17 to go to university, because I never lived home again. You know what I mean? For me, was I probably had a lot more bumps because growing up in an Eastern European household, it was, you just did it. And I think that that's a thing of the past. And I think being able to give kids as much information as possible without overwhelming them is a very useful tool. So thank you for that, Linda. So I'm just watching the time. So teaching, not telling is, again, the secondary part. Milton Berger, again, people that I really, really respect and follow. If we look of involving, we want to make sure that we've got instructions. How is that person able to take the instructions? You and I do things differently. Conversation arose the other day at one of my team meetings where, me personally, if I don't have everything written down in my book, I'm not going to do it. Somebody else said to me, like, well, why don't we teach them to use Google Meets or Google Docs? Well, let's talk about if the child's got the skills to do that. Does he know how to get on? Does he know what a doc is, right? For me, I don't want to use Google Docs. I don't want to. Not going to work for me, Bohdanna. I like writing. We have to always look for the instructions and the ability of how that learner learns, and what are going to be the tools for their ability to take down information and actually do it. Sometimes I think the problem is want versus need. What we want a child to do and what they need to do are not the same thing. We have to be open-minded to ensure that we're reading the child and reading the situation, because when we teach them, it's not about what we want them to learn, but they're going to use. Right? You can teach me Google Meets for the next 50 hours. I'm going to go back to pencil and paper, right? That's important about how to learn instructions and how to take instructions. Yes, and we might teach them Google Meets later, but first we have to have the buy-in of listening to the learner and making sure we hear what they need. The second one is the modeling. Like we said, a lot of it is in person or video modeling. A lot of times, like when I'm doing cooking on Zoom, I'm in my tiny little kitchen cooking. I'm not sitting here with a recipe card going, did you get your tape? Did you get this? I'm doing it right next to them. We know our youth are visual learners, and I dare us to find somebody who isn't. I know very little people who are auditory learners. We all learn by watching. If you showed me how to fix my engine by just talking to me, I'd walk away in tears because I have no idea what you're talking about, A, and B, I don't want to know, right? So it's really important to make sure that we are stressing how the learner learns. Then it's the rehearsal, the practice behavior. I'm going to go fast through this because you have my slides. And then it's the feedback. The corrective feedback can come after that. But let's remember, feedback is really important because feedback's interesting. Because when I work with a lot of BIs or with people, schools, when I work in the States, I'll ask people, how do you like your feedback? And the person goes, I love feedback. I work with feedback. I'm like, great. So then we work. And then I go, listen, I'm going to give you some feedback. And I go, I think you should. And then they go, I was just about to do it. And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I can tell you don't like feedback. There's a difference between saying you like feedback than taking feedback. So it's really important to understand that most people in feedback become defensive, right? Because we want to make the person know that we didn't mean to make that mistake and I'll do better next time. Where does that come from? Maybe it comes from our society asking kids to say sorry all the time. Sorry, say sorry, right? And I've learned a lot and done research on that. I personally never ask my own personal kids to say sorry because I don't find a lot of meaning in it, because they'll say sorry and they think that they don't get feedback after that. Instead of going, hey, let's talk about something, like, I like the way you did that. Can we talk about the other part, starting with value? So feedback is super important, because I think that's a lot of times we're going to lose our learners when they think that feedback is going to be negative feedback. Again, think about feedback with early learners at the table. We get the, do this, and they go, yay, do this, and they do this, and you go, no. They get a lot of negative feedback, right? So feedback is hard for learners, and it's hard for most of us. So let's really think hard about how you're going to apply that feedback, how you're going to start talking about the feedback, and how that feedback is going to change their performance, okay? If I had a lot of hours, I would do this screen just for 2 hours. So here's the case study about Tom. So we talked about Tom's stretches and his strengths. So Tom wants to cook and be independent, going back to the people who asked me about independence. Tom is keen to be independent. He's interested to learn how to cook, be able to make his own snacks, be able to make something for others. However, there are many steps that are important, but for Tom, he's lacking the executive functioning and organization to complete the above without numerous prompts. So think about your own kids, right? Learners, people you work with. If you're doing a skill and you're still looking at your task analysis and you're still heavily prompting, there's a problem. The problem is probably the buy-in, the understanding of why you're doing it, or the way that they're learning. Because we're teaching the mechanics of something, the kid might be getting the mechanics, but the mechanics don't always work the same. If I teach you how to put a pot on the stove, but your mom with one of my families is in a wheelchair, your pot has to face a different way. But when you're done, you have to reface the pot that's comfortable for you, right? There's more than just the mechanics. They're reading the room and understanding that you have to learn the skill, but then adapt the skill and be flexible to skill on every given moment, okay? Now, I'm just talking about cooking, but this could pertain to most things. So let's talk about what cooking even is. So for cooking for himself, he's going to learn independence, a leisure skill, creativity. So when you're teaching him to cook, you should be talking about how cool it's going to be when grandpa comes over next week and you can cook him this, right? It's not just put pot on stove, turn stove on. You're trying to get him to understand why he's cooking when he's by himself. There's cooking for others. It's a social skill. It's relationship development. If you're my older kids who are out of high school, you're cooking because maybe you want to have a party. You want to cook some of people's favorite foods. If you know how to cook, you can cook for people when they come over. You talk about all these things. Cooking at work. We talk about, like, one of my kids is right now working at a fast food restaurant. He's the cook. You know what? When you're cooking, look over at your friend going, hey, dude, you want to trade? I'll make the fillet of fish while you make the whatever burger. Hey, friend, what are you doing after work? It's multitasking. You're not just sitting there flipping a burger. You have to remember that when you're cooking, you're navigating to see what everybody else is doing. If your friend next to you is cooking and he drops something and your hands are free, you're going to help him pick it up, right? Cooking correctly, huge. Safety and problem solving. If you are cooking and you didn't use a pot and you got, oven mitts and you got burned, you're not going to do that again because that was a natural reaction to a problem. Problem solving when you're cooking. If you burn something, or if you're going to make a crap load of noodles and your pot's this big, you're going to have a problem with the water going over and over boiling, right? But those are discussions. It's not just like, oh, you overboiled, let's try it tomorrow. You can talk about during that, right? You could talk about, oh, I'm thinking you're going to make a lot of noodles. I'm thinking you're going to make more than yesterday. How was that pot for you? Versus get a different pot. You screwed up yesterday, right? Part of that is really talking and communicating and connecting about what happened without feeling or making that child feel that they were wrong, but building from those mistakes. That's soft skill development. So when we worked on this, so when Tom gets prompted or feedback, he, like talking with his mom before, who was saying that their child doesn't like it. He was not learning these skills. Washing up before cooking, finding a recipe or having an idea before cooking, making sure not to grab the pot with his bare hands. He was getting burnt. Appropriate cleanup after cooking. When you have meat and eggs and stuff on the countertop and walk away, that's a problem. Leaving area clean for next person. If you've got siblings who are coming home after school to have a snack and your peanut butter and your jelly and all your stuff are all over, you are not making your siblings think that you're a good guy. That's all of that is important outside of just the mechanics of how to cook, right? So how can we help Tom to learn these skills? So let's go back to the stretches and to the areas that are he's good at. So let's look at the strengths. What can we look at that he has strengths in? And how can we look at this differently? It's not what we want to teach, it is how Tom needs to learn. So this is the project. I emailed Tom to help me with a project. I'm going to do a food safe booklet video for my classroom. True, going to do this. So in the parentheses, Tom loves to make videos. Tom enjoys helping others. Remember that from his strengths? That's how I'm pulling him in. So when I'm talking to him, I'm saying, I'm going to make these books for other people. And wait a minute, you like to help other people. You'd be a great candidate to help me. He's like, okay. So I'm using what he's told me or what I know about him to pull him in, because without that buy-in, I'm not going to get him to want to make his stretches turn into strengths. So I asked him to be a co-author in this. So quote, he likes to see things come to fruition, like a school play. Remember, he loves drama. He likes to practice because he loves opening night and being really good. And I used that. I said, you were so good in the school play. How about we make this kind of a school play? And when we work together, it's like the practice. And the final project's like the school play that you were in because you rocked it in the school play. So I've shared with Tom that right now I need an assistant that can keep us focused on track. So I asked him, please send me a Zoom date for our first meeting, right? I asked him to send me the Zoom date, small, soft skill, because if I sent it, I know he can send it. I know he knows Zoom. I need him to work on his executive functioning and his follow through. So I was like, okay, here we go. Let's see if this is going to work. We've got buy-in. We had a short 10-minute conversation. The Zoom invite came the next morning at 10 a.m. Thumbs up. So at the Zoom meeting, when we Zoomed, we went over what to write down, what our steps are, a start date for the step one. We're just working on pre-cooking. What are safe things to do before you get in the kitchen? So working on planning and working on what you're going to do after the Zoom is ended. So I saw him not writing and I said, you know what? I better start writing because I know I'm not very good if I don't write stuff down. Shaping and modeling, using that teach method. I didn't say, are you writing stuff down? Are you going to remember this? Because that's going to turn him off. So I got my pencil and paper. I'm going, hang on, bud, my brain, it's been a long week. I'm going to write stuff down. He goes, oh yeah, me too. I go, oh, cool. But I didn't go like, good job for writing stuff down. I reinforced him through my shaping and modeling of me behaving in a way that showed him what to do without me making him feel that he wasn't doing it. So it gets a little tricky, right? We also discussed how to make a video, because that's going to be a strength to represent some of the steps for our visual learners. So that worked under considering how others learn, focusing on others' perspective, right? I want them to understand this can't just be a booklet. This has to be a video because we're going to be working with visual learners. So I said, okay, this was yesterday at 3:30. I asked them for the first draft. We wrote this down. I'd like the first draft by Monday. I'm your boss. This is like a supervisor. He's getting paid to do this. Less than 24 hours later, I've got the draft with clarification questions. So I'm thinking, something along this is turning him on. Something along the lines of what we're doing is reaching him. Is my job done? Absolutely not. This is week one. We know that there's a lot of excitement at the beginning, but that at the end of the day, as the excitement may wane, if I don't continue to put some fire and still have some teaching. I'm applauding him for having the go-to-itness to start it. And it looks pretty good. But he started the draft. He's already looked stuff up. We talked about different ways to look things up. What are the 3 things I want? So this is step one. But by next Thursday, I'm hoping it's on a videotape. So I'm hoping this is going to stay. The fire is going to keep burning. This has just started. So I'm just sharing this with you. But this is going to be a project that I've said it's going to be about 8 weeks. So that will give me one project to work with him over the course of 8 weeks, because we're going to work things like edits. He doesn't know this. I'm going to read some of his things and I'm going to give him edits back. That's feedback. I'm going to say, your sentence may not make sense. Take this. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but think about how it's going to sound to people. Right? So there's so much I can do with this project, so much that he can do in this project, but it's not about making a video for food. It's about getting all those soft skills about caring about doing it well, doing it on time, making sure that he's clear for learners that I told him are younger than him. So if you look at the soft skills, he's doing some leadership as well, right? So all these things I can tell him, thanks for being a good leader. Thanks for doing it on time. I would say that to him, and I will also keep my data. So the next project he does, he's going to have some skills, and I'm going to see if those interpret, and those goes on to the next skill. After that, he might get another job, but we want to make sure the skills interpret. So when he gets a job away from me, I've given him tools, because I'm not just talking to him in a language of, with lack of better words, ABA language. I said to him, I'm going to talk to you like I'm a boss, because I need to teach you what it's going to be like that in the real world. Does it transfer to other things? We'll see. And then I talked a little bit about the connectivity. I'm going faster, sorry. Super important. So why are connections important? So improved advocacy skills, improved social connections, and support are important to improve participation, right? And somebody was talking to me about engaging kids. You can't have participation if somebody's not connected to that person, to that project, or that job, right? So this mom's allowed me to share her story, and I'm going to go through this for some of the younger learners, because I know there's some younger learners. So please let me share this, and if you've got questions, I'm happy to stay a little longer after 3:30. So this learner is 9 years old, grade 3, and this is her learning profile. So she needs heavy prompts to stay on task. The last 2 years, adaptations have been based more on less work rather than maybe, and being in a quiet area, maybe a little bit not as based as much on connectivity or connecting to her work. There's a struggle with her with a social emotional awareness, connection with peers. She enjoys reinforcements in class directions, struggles still with generalization of work to real life. She's a very visual memory, super visual memory, and has an interest in presenting. She really enjoys presenting, seeing her presentation on YouTube or on an iPad. So what was learned, this mom is amazing. She did this really cool project with her daughter on the 6 cedar trees. So building on connections and strengths. Now, as we know, sometimes our learners in school, and this is a little different summer project you could do if your learner's younger, or if you want to just do a project from a book or a novel study, something fun to do. So mom knew her daughter so well that she made this project developing off of connections. She knows her daughter loves animals, so that she is starting with something that's already an interest, but not a stim. So she's going, okay, my daughter connects to animals, but she doesn't stim on them. So I can use this without having to break self-stimulatory behavior. She also knows her daughter is very tactile and kinesthetic. She needs to touch and feel and understand it. We know some kids really need to be a part of their learning rather than just writing in a worksheet or learning off a video. We know that a lot of our kids struggle with process to product, and that's very important to know your kid, to know that it's so important for them to be included in what they're learning. She also needed to have buy-in, that the animals had personalities that were connected to some of her daughter's personalities. So there's that connectivity. She's just not learning through this project on that. I see you, Stella.
Hi, Bohdanna. Susanna asked you, what is a STEM?
Oh, a STEM? I'm sorry, Susanna. So a STEM is when a child may engage in a perseverative thought or behavior that may sometimes disclude them from being able to gather information. So perhaps a child may STEM physically, meaning that they're engaging in a hand or stim, looking at something, eyeing something up very closely, or a verbal stim, saying the same thing over and over again, or perseverating on something, using a certain word over and over. I'm not personally saying stims are bad. We all stim. I come home at night after a long day, I might need a glass of red wine. That might be my stim. What I'm trying to do is decrease maybe some of the stimming only when a child is not being able to gather information from their environment in that moment. I hope that helps. So we don't want to always start maybe a project that a child perseverates on, because they will have a hard time learning new things, because they might want to stay on something that they really like, and they may not be as open to other learning because the first part is so engaging to them. Moving forward is very difficult. So this mom knew her child liked this, but it was not something she was going to get so stuck on that the other part was not going to be engaging. Also, the mom was awesome with doing a video presentation, because as we know now, as this later comes in my, and I'll talk about it now, in our core competencies and in learning, the way to distribute learning or to show your child learning is very open-ended now. We're able to actually prove our kids' learning, not just like pen to paper, but in oral presentations. I actually had a kid do a rap, not wrapping packages, but rap me a song for some of the stuff he learned, because that's the way he wanted to interpret what he learned about a topic with me in class. How creative and groovy, right? But it still showed he learned something and he put something together creatively, so I could give him a mark. But with doing this, this mom was able to hit all these soft skills because she knew her child. She said she was teaching from an interest, increasing independence. The more the child was engrossed in the topic, the more the mom could move back, making connections both to self and socially. Problem solving skills, building on curiosity. That's a huge social skill. Some of you say, my child doesn't want to listen to me because they kind of know it. But if we can open up that youngness for children to be curious and to be interested, that's such an amazing skill. A lot of that's taught through play, right? And presentation and verbal skills. After the project is done, mom and her can reflect and generalize on how they did the work together, how fun that was, looking back on the project, talking about how you did this, I did that. Part of the reflection is going to open her up to feedback later in her life. So mom allowed me to do this. So an example of the project was, there was a raven in the project that was creative, right? So the raven in this project reflected on the animal that was, he is the creative thinker. And then this young girl was able to say, I'm a raven, and these are my creative thoughts, therefore making a connection versus going, here's the raven, here's the next animal, here's this. She could talk about herself and then reflect on how that is to the raven, kind of helping her to start understanding that this is not just a project to put something on paper, but it's meaningful to me because I get to talk about me, which is a little bit maybe of something a favorite thing to her, but reflecting in the project and being able to connect with that. And then later when she sees a raven, hopefully she'll think in her head as a visual, that's creative, I'm creative, there's a creative thought. Or mom can say, hey, when she's doing something maybe she doesn't care to do, mom can even reflect and say, hey, let's be ravens today, right? Using that episodic memory of something she did to try to instill a new topic that maybe not as engaging. So everything this mom does, or everything this little young person does, is not just a project, but that project is about talking, discussing, thinking about how we can use that for the next project, and thinking about how we could do that in general within our life, because every moment's a teachable moment. So those are some of the things for the summer, just very small ideas, because I want to reflect again that there is nothing you can't do in the summer. Obviously during COVID, we're a little bit limited, but everything should be making a project into a connective learning experience. Also reflecting on really heavily how we learned, remembering all the time, when you learned a rule, did you need constant reinforcement? I always talk about to my kids, when I learned something about, like when I learned stick shift, I didn't want somebody sitting next to me going, now you're in first, now you're in second, put it in third, right? It's all about teaching those skills so your child or your learner can do it as independently as possibly they can. so it becomes second nature for them. And so they can become as independent as possible with the skills they've taught. By using those soft skills, by us reading them, and when we're teaching, try as much as you can to insert them all the time, having those discussions. Even if you're doing a math sheet, anything that you're doing, don't make it a 5-minute experience, make it a 15-minute experience. Everything that you're doing, reflect on why. The why is so big to me. I love teaching kids and telling them why I'm teaching this to you is it's going to be beneficial to you this later, right? But not doing it in a way where I'm going, today we're going to talk about why you're doing this, because we know kids don't like that. They don't want to be preached at. They want to be reflected with and talked at. And most of the time, I struggle with learning this, even as a mom with 3 kids, saying it as short as possible. Because when we over talk too much, kids tune out and they don't want to hear it, right? And again, quality of life is very important. Many of our learners, and even if they don't tell you this, they want a lot of things that everybody else wants. Everybody wants relationships. Everybody wants a job. Everybody wants to be able to be independent and go out on their own. A lot of young learners are telling me they want to drive, right? And I think that part of this is what's really important is that quality of life is really important. And I think that sometimes when kids get older and they don't want to listen, please take away from this, hopefully, that it's not them being difficult. It comes from fear. It comes from uncertainty. It comes from maybe not knowing a little bit that I'm missing a skill and I'm afraid that I've gone too far so I can't learn it. And it might have gone from failure. It might have gone from a place that they tried it in a way that they didn't get it, but we now have to use a different approach. And like I said before, going back to teaching it in a different way. So sometimes I find we hit that so hard so many times and we wonder why the kid's not learning it. It really can come from a fact that it's not that they can't learn it. It's maybe that we're not teaching in a way that they're learning it. So I hope this was helpful. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. I know it was fast. And I know that if anybody has more questions, I maybe pass them through Stella or on Facebook. I'm happy to ask any other or answer any other questions that people have. But I'm so appreciative that you took your time this afternoon to be here with me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bo. I think you have put money in our pocket. Oh, a lot. Thank you so much for spending an hour and a half with us. We understand that you're very busy, and we are hoping that we'll have maybe a part 2 workshop coming up in September.
Absolutely. I'm very, very fortunate and very humbled that you asked me, Stella, always. And I'm also, very, very happy to always be a supporter of BC Autism and yourself. And I hope that people walked away with a little bit of information. And again, I'm grateful that you're here today.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of people say thank you to you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, it says, thank you, Bo. Great information. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm humbled. So
bye.